Welcome to the Catching Up with Casey show. If you are tired of chasing buy-in, frustrated with teams who can't seem to get on the same page, or over the constant struggle of holding people accountable without micromanaging, this is the show for you. I'm Casey Watts, speaker, author, and the creator of the Clarity Cycle Framework. I help leaders just like you take teams from frustration to alignment so teams can work collectively toward a common purpose in a committed way instead of against each other as though they are functioning in different organizations. And we do it all through the craft of clarity. Whether you lead from the middle or you are the front-facing leader of your organization, on this show, we bring clarity to the seemingly small things in leadership that make the biggest difference, because clarity precedes capacity. Now, with all of that said, let's dive into today's episode. Well, hey everybody, welcome again to an episode where we are bringing clarity to the seemingly small things that make a big difference. And today we are talking about what leaders can do to support small group math instruction. And I feel like what we're going to talk about today will apply not only to small group math instruction, but just small group instruction in general. So I have with me Marcy, who is the founder of Saddle Up for Second Grade and also an author of a book that we're actually going to talk about today. So Marcy, welcome to the show. Tell our audience a little bit about who you are and the work that you do.
Yeah, hi. I'm so excited to be here. My name is Marcy Bernethy. I am the founder of Saddle Up for Second Grade, where I have been creating educational resources for teachers for over 12 years, which is so crazy to think that. But I'm also still in the classroom. I currently am a part-time math interventionist, but I've been in education for, 16 years. That's so crazy to say. For 16 years, I've been in and out of the classroom, from being a full-time classroom teacher to being a educational consultant. And now I teach math intervention part-time. And I have a huge passion for math instruction. That's kind of my niche and what I like to focus on. And I specifically really enjoy talking about small group instruction in math, because there's such a math deficiency in the United States, and it tends to just kind of get pushed to the side because there's such a focus on ELA, but no one ever talks about math. And so I recently just released a book called Small Groups, Big Impact, and it's all about confidently implementing small group instruction into your math block.
I love it so much. It's so interesting. I have worked with several districts lately who are thinking about, like, what is our area of focus for our campus and what are our goals that are going to help us to reach that? And several of them are really focused on math and math instruction or math improvement in general. And it's what I'm hearing is we focused on reading for so long and push for reading instruction and improvement in phonics, etc. But we've kind of lost out on some time with a focus on math, and now we're really seeing it. So you just published a book, like just recently published this book. Tell a little bit more about what made you write the book? Like, what was the kicker that you're like, I'm writing a book about this?
So I was the kid growing up that really struggled with math. I dealt with a lot of math anxiety from a very young age. It kind of started in, I'm going to say, kind of upper elementary school. And that's when I really started to realize that math did not come easily for me. I'm a very ELA, like writing minded person naturally, and math was not my forte. And I really just started to notice the struggles that I had around it. And as I got older, and I actually tell this story, chapter 1 of my book, it's all about my anxiety and my struggles around math and how that shaped into my teaching career. But I always say, like, when math started to involve letters instead of numbers, like, that's when it really started to kick in, and the anxiety really kind of set in. And I am from a very small rural town in north central Texas, and I didn't have the opportunity to have a lot of support around that. And as teachers, we know when we have kids that struggle in the classroom, if they don't have the support system at home to help kind of back them up, then they can just they can very easily slip through the cracks. And luckily for me, my mom was a upper elementary and middle school math teacher, so I had the support at home. But what happens to the kids that don't have support at home? And I go on to share, I get into college, and I was the kid who had to take two remedial college math, some kind of classes before I could take college algebra. And I remember it was my freshman year of college. I'm 3.5 hours away from home, and I'm taking this class, and I'm not getting it. It doesn't click. And at the time, I was a college athlete. I cheered in college, and for the first time ever, if I didn't pass this class, like, I was going to lose my cheerleading scholarship. And I remember I'm sitting on the floor of my dorm room. iPhones were not a thing then, that's also crazy to think about. But I couldn't just FaceTime my mom and be like, I need help with this. And I think it was just through lots of tears and going into study hours and these poor professors trying to help me the best that they possibly could. And then I think they just barely passed me, just to be like, this poor girl's not ever going to do anything with math. We're just going to pass her so that she can go on, kind of thing. But I remember I wasn't an education major at first. And I started out, I was actually a photography major. And I remember about a year and a half into my college career, and I called my mom and I said, I think I'm going to switch my major to education. And she actually tried to talk me out of it.
Wow.
Just because of the anxiety and the struggle that I had growing up. And ultimately I ended up making that decision. And that one decision right there has really kind of shaped almost my entire career. And I survived my first year teaching. I taught first grade, and then my second year teaching, I was still living far from home, and I wanted to be closer to home. And so I actually got hired in the school district that my mom taught at. Wow. Again, this is another rural area. And they call me, and I was originally hired to teach third grade. And they called me and they said, we're gonna kind of change it up a little bit, and we're gonna go departmentalized, and we want you to teach only second grade math. And at that particular time, I was like, yeah, like, this is going to be great. I'm so excited. Like, thank you for the opportunity. And I hang up the phone, and I'm having like almost like a panic anxiety attack on my parents' front porch. I'm 24 years old, and the anxiety that I carried around math from, upper elementary and on into my early years of teaching, like, it still followed me. And I felt like, okay, this is something apparently I'm supposed to do. But I immediately, before I even started the job, I felt like I was going to fail my kids.
Yeah.
Because I had so much anxiety built up around it.
Wow. That's an awesome story. And I feel like we have kind of similar paths, because I didn't start out in education either, and then kind of transitioned to that. And look where we are now. Where it's like, I feel like we're so passionate about it,
It's crazy. Yeah.
But a lot of that comes from our prior experiences. And what was it like for us growing up as students, and how can we approach education in a way that supports the students that were just like us? So, okay, I'm really excited about our conversation, because the title of the episode is What Leaders Can Do to Support Small Group Math Instruction. Now, here is what's interesting about this episode. And I'm going to go ahead and put this out there. So Marcy comes with the experience of actually implementing small group instruction. And I come with the experience of helping leaders to support teachers in implementation. So as you are listening to this episode today, you're going to notice us kind of going back and forth with those two different lenses. And something that you might consider, especially if you are someone, a school who's like, we really want to focus on math improvement next year, I'm going to pitch this to you guys as listeners. think about how you might partner with me and with Marcy. So let me tell you a little bit about what that could look like. So leaders, you might partner with me to develop a plan for how you might roll this out to your campus. Like we would look at your campus improvement plan. If math was something you wanted to focus on, we would say, this is our area of focus. Okay, now what are some goals to help us reach that area of focus? And one of those goals might be, we want to implement small group math instruction. Once we create a plan for that, and you know you're going to need some professional development for your teachers, that's where you can bring in Marcy to support teachers. Okay, so I'm just throwing that out there, something for you guys to think about as you listen to this episode. Okay, tell us now about actual small group instruction. So in your book, you talk about small group instruction, but you really talk about guided math. Can you just explain, like for those of us who are like, what even does small group math instruction look like? Explain what your experience is and what you advocate for teachers to do.
Yeah. So I feel like I kind of got to give a little bit of backstory that kind of leads into how I even discovered this type of teaching. I took that job teaching only second grade math, and I was probably halfway into the school year, and my administrator at the time, she comes walking into my room and she says, we're going to send you to, it was to our local service center. We're going to send you to a half-day workshop on something called math centers. And at that particular time, I didn't really know what that was. And so I was like, okay. And so I took off. I went to this half-day workshop, and I remember sitting in that workshop, and it was all about just really pulling kids to the small group table and working with them on differentiated instruction while the rest of your kids worked independently on various activities. And I remember sitting in that workshop, and I remember it was like a light bulb moment for me. You know, like when as teachers, when we work with kids and we experience those light bulb moments with them and you get so excited and I'm like, it's finally clicking. That was my light bulb moment. I'm sitting in this room. I remember it was freezing cold. Like service centers are always really cold.
Yeah.
And I remember like this light bulb moment like went off in my head, and I was like, this is what I needed when I was a kid as a student who was struggling with math. Because for me growing up, I don't ever remember working with a teacher one-on-one. I don't ever remember playing any kind of game. I don't remember math being hands-on. For me, when I think about math instruction, when I was a kid growing up, I remember Saxon math workbooks. We would do one half of the workbook page together, and then the teacher would turn us loose and we would do the other half of the workbook page independently. And then I remember overhead transparency sheets. Those are the two things that I remember.
Yeah.
And looking back on it, there was nothing wrong with that kind of instruction because that's just how everything was taught at that particular time. But what about the kids who that didn't click? If you didn't get it right away, which there's so much more research behind that now, that when kids don't get it right away, then what happens, right? And so I remember I'm sitting in this workshop and it clicks in my head and I'm like, okay, this is what I'm going to do. Like, this is how I'm going to be an awesome math teacher. So I remember driving, it was 2 hours home, and I'm mapping out this plan in my head right now. I want to remember this workshop was like 2.5 hours. Okay. Yeah. So it wasn't like a full on training. And I go straight to my school that day. And I got, if you remember mailbox magazines back at the time. So the mailbox magazines, and I ran off all of these like printable mailbox magazine games. And I really thought that I could just go in the next day. And I was like, this is what I'm just going to do. It's going to be fine. It's going to be great. Right. Yeah. It didn't work. It was terrible. Because I had no plan. And I'm going to say the first probably like 2-ish months that I even remotely tried to teach whatever I didn't even really know what small group instruction was, right? Remember, I only had this like 2.5 hour PD training that was, I don't even know.
Gave you a light bulb moment, but that's about it.
Gave me a light bulb moment, but that was it. Because at the time there wasn't a lot of information out there on the internet teacher social media was it was barely a new thing.
Yeah.
But I knew in my head that I was like, I've got to figure this out. Something kind of kept nagging at me. Actually, I share in the book of one time I'm trying this out. It's not working. I'd spent all this time making these like laminated file folder games, and a group of kids tore them in half. And I got up from what I was doing, and my partner teacher at the time, we had this big closet that was in the middle of our room. And what that was like our safe haven, like, like that's where we kept like all the chocolate and all the, like all the good stuff. And I remember going in her room, and I gave her, we had like the look, it was like our signal, right? Like we needed each other. So she comes in there, and I'm like, tears are just streaming down my face. I was like, I can't do this. Like, this is not working. She gave me a pep talk, and it ended up being fine. But it led me to, I didn't want to give up, because I knew that this is what I needed as a kid, and this is what my kids needed. I just had to figure it out.
Yeah.
Right? And at that particular time, it was hard because like I said, there wasn't a ton of research out there. And so over time, I learned about something called the guided math framework. And what it is, it's a 5-part framework. A lot of people think that it's a curriculum. It's actually not a curriculum. That's a big misconception. It is a framework within how you teach and structure your curriculum. So it consists of 5 parts. Number 1 is a warm-up. So this is going to be a quick 5-minute review of a previously taught skill. So think of something along the lines of number talks or something with math fact fluency. It's just a quick spiral review to kind of get their brains thinking. Then you're going to move into your whole group lesson, and that's going to consist of a 15 to 20 minute max targeted mini lesson over the current skill that's being taught. Then you're going to shift, and you're going to move into independent practice. So that's part number 3, where kids are going to work independently on what they just learned in the mini lesson. So this is where a workbook could come into play, or I'm a big math journal, interactive notebook girl, or hands-on learning, math games, technology, things like that. So let's see, warm up, whole group instruction, independent practice, and then you move into your small groups. So small groups, and I'm going to call them math stations. A lot of people call them math centers. Mm-hmm. I call them stations just because when I was teaching 2nd grade, I felt like stations felt more big kid, more grown up, whereas centers kind of sounded more primary. But essentially, if you hear math centers, math workshop, math stations, it's all the same thing. So that's going to be your 4th part, and your small group table is a part of that. So during your station time, kids are working on various activities independently, and they're rotating through these different activities. And one of those rotations is the small group teacher table, where you are providing targeted, differentiated, that's the big part, targeted, differentiated instruction based on students' academic needs instead of what the curriculum and the workbook is saying that they need. So it's differentiated based on their level. And then the 5th part is a reflection. So that's when you come back as a group and you do like a quick talk over what students have learned. How do they feel about their learning? It could be something as simple as an exit ticket that consists of just, 5 minutes max. You're just kind of wrapping up your lesson. So that's essentially the guided math framework. So you've got your warm up, whole group instruction, independent practice, stations, and reflection.
I love it. The conversations like this kind of make me feel like I want to go back into the classroom. I want to go back and teach because it is so impactful when you can implement it effectively. Okay, but here's the question.
Okay.
Well, I have 2 questions. Let's first talk about the benefits. What have you found are like 3 major benefits of this approach to instruction?
Okay, so obviously the biggest benefit is when you get to pull a group of kids to your small group table, you're working with them on their level. So let's say you have a group of students and they're below academic level. These are the kids that are, when you're teaching in a whole group setting, they're not catching on quickly. They might be reluctant to raise their hand and ask questions because maybe they feel embarrassed. They struggle. They don't want anyone to know that they struggle, those kinds of things. And when you get to pull those groups of kids and you're working with them, and you're not necessarily in a one-on-one setting, but you've got a max of 6 kids around you. So you're in a smaller setting and you're focusing on their academic needs. You get to know them on, I always say, you get to know them on a more like intimate level, and they tend to open up. They tend to open up more, and they get to ask questions. You get to address student misconceptions really easily because there's only a few kids in front of you. And so when you're in a whole group setting, you don't get to address student misconceptions with everyone very easily. And so honestly, that's just kind of my favorite part of all of it, is when not just working with your lower level students, but just like as your class as a whole. So if you're working with those advanced students, the ones that catch on within one lesson and then they've got it, you get to work with them and you get to challenge them more independently, get them to do higher order thinking. Whereas when you're teaching only in a whole group setting all the time, you don't get to do those things. So you get to really hone in and target your instruction based on what your kids actually need. And it's helping you fill in those little bitty gaps that your kids need in order to succeed on the current academic level. Because I think we all know when students have academic gaps, if it's just passed over and passed over and passed over, the gaps get further and further. And that's what I see as a math interventionist right now. And that's my job, is to try to close in those gaps. And so when you are working in a small group setting, that's what you get to focus on. Yes, you're still teaching the academic skill that you're supposed to be teaching. So let's say you're teaching place value. That's kind of always my go-to example. But let's say you're teaching place value. And so depending on where you are, your standard might be different. Like I know Texas teaches place value to 1200 in second grade, where most other states teach to 999. So let's say you have a student who really is struggling and they still need help with place value with numbers, let's say just up to 999 or 120, and they need to master that before they can even understand place value to the hundreds. And then you have those groups of kids who are like, okay, they're ready for place value to the upper thousands, 10,000s, 100,000s. You can take a same lesson that's being taught, and you can very easily change the academic level by changing the focus of the number. You can still teach the exact same lesson, but swap out the numbers. Where everyone is getting the academic need that's targeted to them. Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think too, when we look at the whole structure of this, regardless of like beyond just these math stations, like beyond just the small group time, really, if you look at all of those 5 components that you talked about with guided math instruction, you're differentiating within that structure in and of itself, regardless of whether you're pulling small groups or not. But just pulling that small group is an additional, like, now we're targeting your very specific needs to bridge those gaps.
Yeah.
Okay. So here's the big question, because I feel like we've kind of hashed out like misconceptions that teachers have, but that also leads to, what are the pushbacks that you've noticed teachers having when it comes to small group instruction?
So the two, I'm going to say the 2 biggest ones, and I've kind of already addressed it. One is they'll say, okay, well, my curriculum doesn't do that. And I mentioned earlier, guided math is not a curriculum. It is a framework for how you teach your curriculum. Whether you are, you're supposed to be using a mandated school curriculum, maybe you're allowed to supplement, which I've created supplemental resources to go along with this particular framework. And I think that's one of the first mindset shifts that teachers have to get over, is that it's not a curriculum, it's a structure for how you teach your curriculum.
Yeah.
The second biggest thing that I always see is teachers will say, I don't have time. And that's absolutely not true. It's all about a mindset shift, right? Because as teachers, and it's how we're trained. I mean, I'm going to be honest, what we learn in college, we don't really take a whole lot of that into the classroom setting. But growing up, so, like I said, growing up, I never learned in a small group setting. It was all whole group, where the teacher stood in front of the board and they talk for however long, and then you do something in your workbook, right?
Yeah.
Well, you've got distractions. Kids aren't paying attention. I share this story in the book, but I say, let's be real. You're teaching and you've got one. I teach elementary, so we have lots of little silly distractions. But I'm like, if you have one kid that farts, your whole lesson is just over. It is.
Yeah.
Let's be real, because they all start laughing, and then it takes you 20 minutes just to get them riled back up, and before you know it, your time is up because you couldn't get kids to stop laughing. Like that's honest. I'm being honest. And so the guided math framework can work. It doesn't matter if you have 45 minutes to teach math, or if you have 60 minutes, 75 minutes, 90 minutes. And in the book, I actually walk through those 4 schedules. So 45 minutes, 60 minutes, 75 minutes, 90 minutes. It's absolutely doable. It's all about the mindset shift in how you're teaching. You are getting away from spending your entire 45 minutes or your entire 60 minutes standing up in front of your kids and doing this giant whole group lesson, which, if I'm being realistic, they're probably going to lose it's not going to capture their attention for that long. So their minds are going to start to wander. And when their minds start to wander, they're not learning. And so you have to make that shift. And the biggest shift that teachers have to make is cutting that whole group instruction time from 60 minutes down to 15 to 20 minutes. Yeah. So instead of, if you're looking at a curriculum, like a mandated curriculum lesson, so let's say it might have a video to show, and then you're going to do some kind of work with manipulatives, and then you're going to do these 15 questions of this workbook page together, and then you're going to move on and they're going to do these 15 questions of this workbook page together, or independently. You can't do it that way anymore. You have to pick and choose like the core part of it. Like, what exactly are you wanting them to get out of it? Yeah. And so you spend 15 to 20 minutes focusing on that particular topic. So whether it be watching a video, if you're going to watch a video, you're going to watch a video and you're going to do some manipulative work, and maybe that's it. If you're going to create an anchor chart, you're going to create an anchor chart, and that's it. If you're going to work with manipulate like that, you have to pick like your 2 things instead of trying to do all of it. Yeah. Because your core teaching is not necessarily, it's still taking place in your whole group setting, but realistically, your core teaching is now going to be at your small group table. Yeah. Yeah. And so that's the shift that teachers have to make. And I always say, education's constantly changing. It's changing every day, and it's changing now, especially like it's changing rapidly. And our kids don't learn the same way that they did 5 years ago, 10 years ago, 30 years ago. They don't learn the same way. And so as teachers, we have to be willing to constantly adapt our teaching methods to meet the needs of all of our kids, because, like, let's be real, I've got young children and their little attention spans are like this. And so as educators, what can we do to hold their attention to teach them effectively so that they're actively learning? Yeah. And so with the guided math framework, you're kind of constantly moving also, because especially when you get to like the station part of it, your kids, they're rotating, and they're kind of constantly moving and shifting. And so that helps as well. Yeah. Yeah. I want to put on the leader hat. So we're going to come to a close here in just a second. But I want to put on the leader hat
before we close and take what Marcy has said, and I want you to think, leaders, about, okay, now implementation, these two things that get in the way of teachers actually implementing this. And I would say that those two things are typically the same two things for just about any kind of instructional change that you're wanting to take place on your campus. So if we think about, we want to improve math proficiency, and one of the ways that we think is going to benefit us is small group instruction. And the way that we're going to get small group instruction is we have to start shifting our mindset. So we are looking at this framework. It's like a framework for fitting in our curriculum and thinking about what are the things, the one or two things, like Marcy said, that I'm going to focus on in this lesson that are going to have the biggest impact, the two skills that I know students need to walk away with. Well, as an instructional leader, I would, right now is the time to start thinking about this. I would go ahead and start thinking about, okay, our area of focus is math proficiency. One of our goals is to implement, it could be small group instruction, or it could be the guided math framework, whatever it is. So you're going to take that, instructional leaders, and you are going to present it to your staff. And the way you're going to do this, and I have a podcast series coming up. I think the first episode actually lands this afternoon. So take a look at that. But it's 4 podcast episodes, and I tell you, how do we lead instructional change? This is a great episode to kind of get you started in that. Because I would take that area of focus and goals, and I would do what's called listening tours and go gain insight from your teachers. So you're sharing with them, here's our area of focus and here are our goals. Tell us what's on your mind about this. How have you implemented this in the past? What does that look like? What gets in the way of you wanting to get on board with this? Learn what's on the minds of your teachers so that you can then create an implementation plan that they actually can take ownership of. And then I'm going to suggest that you bring in Marcy, because your teachers aren't going to be able to do it just on their own. Even if you picked up her book, which I highly recommend you do, even if you do a book study, that doing a book study is one thing. Seeing it in action and having someone coach you through that is totally different. So just kind of like your experience, Marcy, you went to this PD for 2 hours, you got some like nuggets of gold, and it had you thinking, but then you had to muddle through it. And so many of our teachers will start to muddle through it and feel like it's not worth it because it just doesn't work. And we'll give it maybe a day, or maybe a couple of weeks, and they're like, I'm out. This is too much. So yeah.
Yeah. And, another piece that goes along with, with everything that you just said is, the first couple of months that I tried this, I share a lot of like the backstory in the book and, of things that happened, but it did not work. There were lots of tears. There was lots of crying involved. And what I realized was I was missing the classroom management piece.
Mm-hmm.
You cannot expect these kids, whether they're in kindergarten, whether they're in 4th grade, whatever grade you're teaching, you cannot expect them to just know what to do. Yeah. Even the teeny tiniest little thing, I'm talking about walking from their desk to where this, where this basket of math manipulatives is sitting on the shelf. They have to be taught how to walk from their desk to that basket, and then how do they properly use what's in their basket. So like they have to be taught how to clean up properly. They have to be the teeny tiniest, like little bitty things that you would think like these kids already know how to do this. Like I don't need to spend time. No, the like I said, the smallest little teeny tiniest steps, you have to ease into it. And I actually walk you through this process a little bit in the book, but it actually takes me personally about 4 to 5 weeks of training and prepping my kids and building up their stamina before I'm even pulling any kind of kid to the small group table.
Yep. Yep.
Because if you don't take the time, it's like anything else, right? If you don't take the time to properly implement the routines and the procedures behind it,
Mm-hmm.
then what's the point? Because then you're just
Yep.
going to constantly be chasing student behavior.
Absolutely.
The group that I had last year, so last year I was full-time in second grade. It actually took me about 7-ish weeks to really train them before I even fully launched small groups. It took me a little bit longer than normal because of, student behavior and expectations.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
But once we got it, we were rolling for the rest of the year.
Yeah.
And so when you take that extra time and you implement these little bitty teeny tiny things very slowly, from how they work in a group, kids, they need to be taught if you're working with a group or you're playing a partner game, what does that look like? What does it look
Yep.
like? What does it not look like? And there's lots of modeling that goes along with that.
Mm-hmm.
Again, taking care of your materials and putting things away properly. How do your voices sound when you're working in different groups? How are you going to transition? Where are you going to go? There's all of these little pieces, right? And that's what I was missing from the beginning.
Yeah.
And I say, it was through trial and lots of error that I made this system or this framework actually work for me. And it took me, it took me a couple of years to where I really felt confident in what I was doing. And looking back on little 10-year-old me that would cry anytime I ever had to do a timed math fact fluency test. That's a whole nother conversation we can talk about, by the way. But looking back, I never in my wildest dreams would 10-year-old me think that I'm sitting here right now being passionate about teaching math, because it used to have such a hold on me. And probably the first 3 or 4 years of my teaching career, it did. And now it's not. Now it's my jam and I love it.
Yeah.
But there's all these little pieces that need to be put together in order to make it work.
Yeah. And I think too, we talk about this with students a lot, like all of the modeling and the small, I say, script the critical moves. So in my book, when I'm talking about leadership and leading teams, we're scripting the critical moves. We do that with students because they're students. We don't do that with adults, and for whatever reason, we think, well, if we explain it or if they see it once, then it's going to, or if we have APD on it, then it's going to they're going to know how to do it.
Click. And
right.
Unfortunately, at least for me, I'm not that way. There might be some people out there that are like that. I, unfortunately, am not one of those people.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. This has been such a good podcast episode. As we close, where can people find you, and remind us of the title of the book again? It will be in the show notes, but just remind us of the title.
Yeah. So the title of the book is called Small Groups, Big Impact, A Confident Teacher's Guide to Math Instruction. And you can find the book. You can find it on Amazon. You can also head on over to my website, which is Saddle Up for Second Grade, the number 2, not spelled out. So saddleupforsecondgrade.com/book. And there you can find information about the book. You can contact me for PD opportunities and all the things you can find there.
Awesome. Thank you, Marcy. This has been a great conversation.
You're welcome.
And guys, check out the show notes. And again, think about how you can partner with Marcy. Leaders, think about how you can partner with me so we can get it off to a good, solid start. Okay, guys, we will catch you in the next episode. Bye, everybody. Hey, listener, I am so honored that you listened to today's episode, and I hope you gained something valuable from it. I'd also be honored if you did me 3 solid favors. First, subscribe to this show. I've got a lot of great content coming up, and I don't want you to miss any of it. Second, be sure you're following me on social media platforms. You can find me at Catch Up with Casey on LinkedIn or Instagram. And finally, if you are looking to book a dynamic and relatable speaker for your next event, conference, or retreat, I would love to bring a message about how the craft of clarity makes a significant impact on both leadership and life. Until next time, always